I'm explaining the philosophy of the Bhagwatam to you and the greatness of the Bhagwatam. So far I've explained that the Shreemad Bhagwatam is one of the 18 Puranas, the most important out of the 18. It is an eternal scripture of Sanatana Dharma. It is the explanation of the Brahma Sutra as stated by Vedavyasji, which also contains the essence of the Upanishads. So from a philosophical point of view, the Bhagavad is very important. In fact, it is said that without the Bhagavatam, you cannot correctly understand the meaning of the Vedas. Of course, Bhagavad also cannot just be studied by anyone. Shastra Veda Nigama Pravinas Pathagama Vyakarana Dinishta Dina Hare Bhagavata Prasadam Janati Ko Bhagavatantarartham. The Bhagavatam itself states that even if someone is a master of Sanskrit grammar and a scholar of our scriptures, yet they cannot understand the meaning of the Bhagavatam, Bina Hare Bhagavata Prasadam. Without the grace of Shri Krishna, no one can understand the meaning of the Bhagavatam. In fact, in the same way or in a similar way that the Vedas, Vedo Narayana Sakchat, they are actually a form of God. In a very similar way, the Bhagavatam is a form of God. Bhagavat is a noun. Basically means Bhagavan. Bhagavat is also a form of Krishna. Krishna has put himself into the Bhagavatam, as you'll see in one of the stories that I relate to you today. So I've been explaining this Bhagwat Mahapuran, the greatness and the importance of the Bhagavatam. Along those lines, I was relating that originally the knowledge of the Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavat itself, was transmitted from Bhagavan Shri Krishna to Brahma. And Brahma gave the Bhagavatam to Naradji. Naradji gave the Bhagavatam to Vedavyas, and then Vedavyas gave that knowledge of the Bhagavatam, or you can say Vedavyas wrote the entire Bhagavatam and then taught that to his son Shukadevji. So yesterday I was telling you about Shukadev. Shukadevji is a unique example. There's never been anyone like him. Stayed in his mother's womb for 12 years before he finally came out, just appeared, emerged from her body. She had no discomfort during that time. He was absorbed, completely absorbed in what we would call Brahma-leen Samadhi. Brahma is different from Brahma. Brahma is the personality responsible for creating our Brahman, our planetary system. Brahm is usually used in the context of Nirakar Brahm, formless God. God has many forms, and one of those aspects is also formless. One single God, but he can also be known as formless. So, formless God is also blissful. Sat Chit Anand, the form of bliss. Anyone who attains formless God experiences that unlimited divine state of peace we call Brahmanam. So Shukadevji was so entirely absorbed in this state of Brahmanand, it's called Brahma-leen Samadhi. Samadhi means a state of absorption. Brahma-leen means His mind was totally one with formless God, to the point that he saw nothing in this world other than himself, because he and God had become totally one. Not to the point a soul can never become one and cease to exist, but he can merge into formless God. So that was his experience, that there was no difference between him and Brahma, and he was totally absorbed in that state until Veda Vyasji sent his disciple with a shlok from the Bhagwat. Now in the Bhagwat, the ras of the personal form of God is there. There's a difference. You can understand it like this. Let's say that there's a mother and she's been wishing to have a child born to her for many years. She finally is able to become pregnant, and while she's pregnant, she keeps thinking that when my child is born, what will his face look like? What will his eyes look like? What will it feel like to hold him in my arms? Or when my child says to me, "Mummy," or gives me a hug or a kiss. She imagines all of that. Then after her child is born, she doesn't have to imagine it. It's not abstract anymore. It's real. She can actually touch her child, hold him, talk to him, nurse him. So she's experiencing all of those pleasures with her five senses, the pleasures of motherhood. Before, it was an abstract thing. She couldn't actually enjoy the existence of her son with her eyes, nor her ears, nor her nose. So she couldn't experience her son with her five senses. She had like an abstract joy of her son. Then it became something that was not abstract but concrete, something right in front of her. She could touch and smell and hold and enjoy in that way. Now, if you ask that mother who's enjoying the direct association of her son in a personal form right in front of her, that she can experience with all five of her senses, if you ask her, would you like to trade that for that abstract joy you got in imagining your son before he was born? She would say, no, why would I do that? Why would I want to trade this for that? No mother would ever do that. So saints have described that it's somewhat analogous to that. The difference between experiencing formless God, which you can't experience with any of your senses, because formless God has no form. So what will you see? No qualities. So what will you smell? What will you touch? What will you hear? There's nothing to experience in a concrete way. It's an abstract divine existence. So that's why from that point of view, the bliss of Brahmanam, the bliss of formless God, is said to be further enriched when someone can actually experience God in his personal form, just like that mother experiencing the direct association of her child in a personal form. Saints who have attained God in his personal form, like Ram or Krishna, they actually get to experience God with all five of their senses. It's not an imagined bliss. It's not an imagined enjoyment. It's the real thing they're experiencing through all five of their senses. So I told you that although Shukdev Ji was absorbed in the bliss of formless God to the point that it was like his senses weren't even working. If you yelled in his ears, he wasn't roused from his samadhi. Yet he was roused from his samadhi by a softly chanted verse of the Bhagwatam, because in that shlok was the bliss of the personal form of God, Shri Krishna. So when he heard that shlok chanted, he actually saw Shri Krishna in front of him. And when the next shlok was chanted, he actually experienced that guna, that quality of Shri Krishna. So this was all explained to Shaunakadik Paramahans when they questioned Sukji, as I told you yesterday, that how is it possible that Shukdev came and listened to the whole Bhagwatam when he was so absorbed in the bliss of formless God? So Sukji explained that Atma Ramascha Munayo Nirgrantharapurukrame Kurvantyahai tukim bhakti mitham bhuta guno hari. He said the qualities of Shri Krishna are such that even someone who's absorbed in the bliss of formless God is forcefully drawn to the bliss of the personal form of God. Whether they are pravritti parayan paramahans, paramahans means absorbed in the bliss of formless God, or nivritti parayan paramahans, both will be forcefully attracted. Pravritti parayan paramahans is like King Janak. He was known as Videha. He had no body consciousness. He was so absorbed in the bliss of formless God. He could put his hand in a fire and he wouldn't realize it. Yet, what happened when Ram and Lakshman came in front of him for the very first time? He was brought there, they were brought there by Vishwamitra. He exclaimed, Inhi vilokat ati anuraga barbas brahma sukhahi man tyaga. Sahaj virag roop man mora thakit hot jimi chakor chandra. Jimmy Chandra Chakora. King Janak exclaims that my mind was like an ocean of peacefulness. I had no attachment to anything, like no ripples on a huge ocean. No ripples of any kind, just an ocean of divine peace. Yet, what happened? My mind was forcefully attracted to what? That same Brahm, the same formless God who appeared before me in a personal form. I saw him in a beautiful, beautiful personal form as Bhagwan Ram. Then I completely forgot about that bliss of formless God, just like a mother completely forgets about that abstract joy she was conceiving in her mind before her child was born. She forgets about that totally now that her son is right there in front of her. King Janak forgot about formless God, although it's the same God, it's not a different God, but he forgot about that bliss since his mind was forcefully attracted to the beauty of God in a personal form. Imagine God's divine beauty? Well, we can't imagine it. It's that great. If you see the most beautiful person in this world, or you think about them right now, maybe it's whoever's Miss Universe, Miss World, maybe it's a beautiful movie star. If you think of that person in your mind, or you're looking at a picture of them, and then I tell you, imagine someone 100 times more beautiful than that. You can't. It's beyond our imagination. Imagine someone 1,000,000 times more beautiful than that. You can't. It's impossible for our mind to imagine. Yet God is unlimited times more beautiful than the most beautiful person in this world. And King Janak, since he himself had divine eyes, he was a God-realized saint, so when Ram came before him, he practically saw that divine beauty in its unlimited blissfulness. So he didn't even have a choice. He said, Barabasa. My mind was forcefully attracted to his divine beauty, and I remained drowned in that bliss of his beauty instead of the bliss of formless God. The same thing happens to Nivritti Parayan Paramahans. He was Pravritti Parayan Paramahans because he was actively engaged in all of his royal and family duties. Pravritti means you're active. Nivritti, inactive, disengaged from all duties and worldly activities. There have been great Paramahansas like that as well, like Sanakadik Paramahans. These are 4 eternal Jnani Paramahansas who always roam around wherever they want, in any abode. They can go anywhere. One time, although they're absorbed in the bliss of formless God, just like King Janak is, one time they went to the abode of Almighty God Vishnu. It's called Vaikunt Abode. So as they entered, imagine, they haven't even gotten to see Vishnu yet in his personal form. Just they entered his abode and the breeze carried the fragrance of a flower which had been offered at his lotus feet. Tasyarvinda nayanasya padarvinda kinjalka mishra tulasi makaranda vayu antargata svavivarena chakartesham samchobhamakcharajushamapi chittatanvo. Bhagwatam says that the fragrance from that flower which had been offered at his lotus feet entered the nostrils of these 4 Jnani Paramahansas, Sanakadi. And what happened? Just from the fragrance, their samadhi of Brahmanand was also revoked. Sanchobhamakchara jusham api chitta tanvo. It was revoked because their mind became completely engrossed in simply that fragrance. Imagine, they haven't even seen him yet in his divine form, just the fragrance, because there's no fragrance of formless God, just an abstract divine bliss. So you can see there's something special in the personal form of God which is not there, which is not experienced from impersonal God, Nirakar Brahma. So it's this special bliss of the personal form of God which is imbued in the Bhagavatam. This Bhagavatam was related by Vedavyas Ji to Shukadev Ji. He listened to the whole thing, completely absorbed in the bliss of Shri Krishna's divine love. And after some time, he related that same Bhagavad to King Parikshit. It is called Paramahansa Samhita for this reason. Yasmin paramahansyamekam amalam jnanam param giyate tachrinvan vipathan vicharana paro bhaktya vimucche nara. It means that this Bhagavatam, it's a very high thing because it has the power to attract the minds of even those great saints whose minds are already absorbed in the bliss of formless God. Imagine the one who knows God, he has no more use for the scriptures. Normally that's what we say. Brahmavid Shruti Murdhini. It means after reaching God, the saint treads on the head of the Vedas. Ved is there for what? Dharmo yasyam madatmaka. Shri Krishna says, Ved is there to get you to me. That's it. So it's like a purohit gets two people married, joins them together, they walk around the fire 7 times. After that, the purohit's work is done. In the same way, the Veda is there to get us to God. Once we've reached God, then Veda retreats back. Veda is there to get the soul to God. So after attaining God, a saint doesn't need the Vedas, doesn't need the Gita. Yet, we see that God-realized saints are attracted and still listening to the Bhagwatam. Shukadev ji imagined the path of Gyan has 8 stages. Vivek, Vairagya, Shamadhi, Shat Sampatti, Mumukchutva, Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan, and Samadhi. So Samadhi is the end, where you end up totally absorbed in a thoughtless state. So why would you go from Samadhi back to the state of Shravan, which means to listen? See, once you pass the first 4 stages of the path of Gyan, then after that you get to do Shravan. Shravana means you listen, what is God? Then once you internalize that by doing manan, remembering again and again, eventually you go through the other stages, you enter into samadhi. So once you're permanently established in that samadhi state like Shukdev ji was, why would you come back and do Shravan again? Yet he came out of his samadhi to listen to the Bhagwatam. That is why it is called Paramahansa Samhita. So the bliss of the Bhagwatam is enough to bring those saints out of their samadhi because they want to indulge in and engross their mind in enjoying the leelas of Shri Krishna. So, how did this knowledge which was given to Shukadev ji, how did it come to us? How am I sitting here and talking to you about the Bhagwatam today? There's a story behind that. It starts with King Parikshit, about whom it said, Garbhe drishtamanudhyayan pariksheta nareshviha. How did he get the name Parikshit? Because when he was in his mother's womb, in Uttara's womb, Ashwatthama had sent the Brahmastra to kill him, and Shri Krishna had come and protected him in the womb. So while he was in the womb, he got the divine vision of Shri Krishna. He saw him. And then after he was born, the first thing he did was look around. Where is he? That one I saw when I was in the womb, that beautiful blue complexion boy, where is he? So he was searching the faces of everyone who was there around him. In other words, he was doing parikchan. He was investigating, seeking. Where is that Krishna? Where is he? So he got the name Parikshit. That Parikshit, after some time, he got to hear the Bhagwatam from Shukdev ji. How did it happen? There's a very interesting story behind it. You see, there was a king named Vajranabh. That king was installed on the throne of Mathura by King Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira, you know, is the eldest of the 5 Pandavas. He ruled India after the Mahabharata war. After the Mahabharata war, Yudhishthira was the emperor, but under him there were many rulers. So Vajranabh, who was in fact the son of Aniruddha, who was the son of Pradyumna, who was the son of Shri Krishna, was installed on the throne of Mathura. In other words, Shri Krishna's great-grandson was installed. Shri Krishna's great-grandson was installed on the throne of Mathura to rule that area. Now one time, after Yudhishthira, Arjun, all the Pandavas, they had left the earth planet. Before that, they had installed Parikshit on the throne as emperor of the entire earth planet, in fact. So Parikshit had a lot of affection in his heart for Vajranabh. He went and visited him one day and he said that, your forefathers, meaning Shri Krishna, they did so much to protect my forefathers. So if you ever need anything, you just let me know. I'll do anything for you. So Vajranabh had a question for him. He said that, I'm here as the king of Mathura, and Mathura means the Braj area of India, where Shri Krishna had descended, where he had lived. I am the king of this Braj area, yet there is no praja. I have no subjects. It's like I'm the king of an empty land. So where did all my subjects go? Can you answer that question for me? In order to answer this question, King Parikshit requested Shandilya Maharshi. Shandilya Maharshi was the Purohit of Nanda Baba's family, actually. And he is a great saint in the tradition of Bhakti. He also wrote Shandilya Bhakti Sutra, 100 sutras explaining about Bhakti. So he requested Shandilya Maharshi to come and explain to Vajranabh what had happened to all the people living in Braj. So he did. He came and he started by explaining what the word Braj means. He said that it comes from the word Vyapti, which means that Shri Krishna is here, everywhere in Braj. They were sitting there in Braj, in the area ruled by Vajranabh, and he said that this Braj is not an ordinary place. Braj is synonymous with Shri Krishna. Shri Krishna in his divine form, as Sat Chit Ananda Brahm, permeates this Braj. And there are two kinds of leelas that Shri Krishna does. Leela means his divine pastimes, his actions. He says there's one Vastavi Leela. In Vastavi Leelas, his eternal divine associates participate. And those Vastavi Leelas are eternally happening in Braj, but you need divine eyes to see them. So if there's a saint of that caliber with divine eyes who is in Braj, he can see Krishna's Leelas happening. Krishna, Radha, Gopis, Gwalbas. These are the Vastavi Leelas. They're eternally happening in Braj but can't be seen by ordinary people. Then he says there are Vyavaharika Leelas, which are manifested during Krishna's avatar. When Krishna takes avatar, it doesn't mean that he stops being omnipresent. It means that he makes himself visible in one place by even those without divine eyes. When he takes avatar, even we could see him. Yet still without divine eyes, we could not recognize him. We would not experience his divine beauty. We would not realize the divinity of his form, yet we could still see him. But due to our material state, we would consider him to be ordinary, like us. Like if you look at a white wall, but you have pink colored sunglasses on, the wall appears to be pink. Something like that, if we were to see Shri Krishna when he's taking avatar, we wouldn't recognize his divinity. We would actually just think he's one of us. Yet we could see him. So when he does these Vyavaharika Leelas, they are visible to anyone and everyone. Now, there are three kinds of saints who take part in these Vyavaharika Leelas. There are the same eternal divine associates who always take part in the Vastavi Leelas, which are eternally happening but unseen by us. So those eternal associates of Shri Krishna also come, they appear on the earth planet and they take part in the Vyavaharika Leelas, which are manifested visibly to everyone here on the earth. The second type of saint are those saints who are divine, but they've never actually experienced the bliss of Krishna's Leelas. So maybe they attained another form of God, like Vishnu. Bhagwan Vishnu is the same as Krishna. They're not different, just like Krishna and formless God are not different. Yet, just like formless God doesn't perform Leelas because he doesn't have a form, how can he do anything? Vishnu, in the form of Vishnu, he has a form, but he doesn't playfully interact with his devotees. So there is no Leela in the almighty abode of God, Vaikuntha. So there are saints who have attained God in other forms, but who desire to experience Shri Krishna's Leelas. So some saints like that also get to come during Shri Krishna's avatar and take part in those Leelas. For instance, there were saints during Bhagwan Ram's time, the sages of Gandak forest, who resided in Sharbhanga ashram, got the divine vision of Ram. Ram actually came to their ashram. But when they desired to come close to Ram, to hug him, embrace him, they weren't allowed to. Ram said, "No, I am Maryada Purushottam Brahm. You can't have that kind of close personal association with me." However, Krishna avatare yuyam gopika bhutva mama lingathat. Krishna Upanishad. Sri Ram told those saints that you will be graced to come as gopis when I come as Krishna. Then you will receive my close personal association. So there were saints like that who had attained Shri Krishna in other forms, but wanted to come and take part in his Leelas. So that's the second type of saint who got to take part in those Vyavaharika Leelas during Shri Krishna's avatar. And the third type of personality who got to take part were actually Devatas, celestial gods, who are the residents of Swarg, which is part of Maya. So they don't have access to the divine world. But there were some Devatas allowed to come and take part in Krishna's Leelas. Also, there are eternal Munis and Rishis who also got to come. So three types of saints: the eternal associates of Shri Krishna, those saints who were taking part in the Leelas for the first time, and also some Devatas and Rishis and Munis who got to come and take part. Now, what happened when Shri Krishna disappeared from this earth planet? It simply meant that in that one form in which he was visible to everybody, he made that form disappear. However, he was still omnipresent. What happened to those eternal saints? Same thing happened with them. They disappeared and were no longer visible to us, yet they're still there taking part in those Vastavi Leelas. Radha, Krishna, all the gopis, they're eternally taking part in these Vastavi Leelas. The second type of saint who got to experience Krishna's Leelas for the first time, they also disappeared from the earth planet and got to take part in, they joined those eternal associates of Shri Krishna and got to eternally take part in the Vastavi Leelas. And the third type, they went back to their own abodes. They went back to Swarg, Devatas, etc. In other words, there was no one left in Braj. They all disappeared. When Shri Krishna left, they all either went with him to his divine abode or they went back to their own individual abodes. There was nobody left in Braj because during Shri Krishna's avatar, there was no ordinary soul like us there. The whole of Braj was populated by these divine personalities. So when Shri Krishna's avatar was done, they all went back and Braj was empty. Shandilya Maharshi explained all of this to Vajranagh and Parikshit. And he told Vajranabh that you now have to do something. Because there's no one here, people have forgotten the Leela places of Shri Krishna. So with my grace, you will go and do devotion in these important places of Braj, and you will realize, you will know, it will be made known to you what Leela of Krishna happened in what place. And in those places you should establish temples and murtis of Radha Krishna and ponds and towns and villages and wells and kunjas. So you have to repopulate Braj and make the people to know where all of these important Leela sthalis are. So Parikshit went to what is now known as Delhi, and he brought thousands of wealthy Sethjis from there to sponsor the development of Braj. And he brought many religious-minded people to come and inhabit Braj. And thus, Braj was repopulated and Vajranabh had some praja to rule over. So after some time, because there had been some people there who had been there before that, there were still Shri Krishna's queens of Dwarika. Before Dwarika was destroyed, Shri Krishna had told Arjun, take all the women and children out. So they were all taken out. And so Shri Krishna's 16,108 queens of Dwarika, they were taken to Mathura and they were kept there protected by King Vajranabh. So one day, as they were there in Braj, all of the other queens came to Yamuna, Kalindi. The river Kalindi has a divine form. She's a divine goddess. So in that form, she is also one of Shri Krishna's queens. They all came to her and asked that, oh, Kalindi, our sister, why is it that you seem to be unaffected by the separation of Shri Krishna? We're all feeling a great separation from him. He's gone from this earth planet. We feel a sense of viraha. So Kalindi replied that, you know, that Radha and Krishna are absolutely one and the same. And Radha is actually the Atma of Shri Krishna. And we all, even including Rukmini, who is the descension of Mahalakshmi, this is what Kalindi told them, we are all Radha's ansh. We're a fraction of her power, and she is absolutely one with Shri Krishna. So I am her dasi. I am her servant. And due to that connection, I feel no separation from Krishna. I only enjoy the divine bliss. So then all of those queens prayed to her and said that now we are also the dasis of Shri Radha. So you please tell us, how can we get to see Krishna's Leelas? How can we get to experience that divine bliss? So she told them, you need to get satsang of Uddhav. Uddhav, you know, Krishna's advisor and friend in Mathura, when Krishna was here, you need to get his satsang. So the queens were thinking, how are we going to get Uddhav's satsang? He's so far away in Badrikashram, we're all the way here in Braj. How can we go all the way over there? Badrikashram is up in Himalaya. Shri Krishna had sent Uddhav there after teaching him the philosophy of Bhagwatam, which is recorded in the 11th canto. He told him, go and stay at Badrikashram, and anyone who comes there, you give him this knowledge. So Kalindi said, he's not only there, he has another form. After Uddhav, you see, Uddhav is another example of a Jnani saint who was enjoying the bliss of formless God, who abandoned that in favor of the divine love of Shri Krishna. Krishna had sent him to Braj during the time of his avatar and told him that he had to go and meet with the gopis. So when he met with the gopis, he realized that they were on a much higher plane than he was, because they were enjoying Krishna's personal association. Even though he was there in Mathura and the gopis were back in Vrindavan, Nandagaon area, physically separated from Krishna, yet for them there was no separation from Krishna. He was right there with them. So he surrendered to them, and with their grace, he also realized Krishna's divine love in his personal form. So when he came back to Mathura, he said to Shri Krishna, Asamaho charanarenu jushamahansyam Vrindavane kimapi gulmalatau shadhinam Yadustyajan svajanamarya pathan chahitva Bhejur mukunda padavim shruti bhirvimrigyam. He requested Shri Krishna to give him a form in Vrindavan as a flowering creeper. Why? So he could always have the foot dust of the gopis that would float on his head whenever they walked by, and that dust went up into the air. And he was granted that wish. So Kalindi said to those queens that you have to go near Kusum Sarovar. It's also a famous pond of Braj near Govardhan Hill. She said, Uddhavji resides there. So if you go there, organize a Kirtan Mahotsav. Have a big Nam Sankirtan. Have a big Nam Sankirtan, and Uddhav will come and give you his satsang. So they all went there, and Vajranath and Parikshit, they organized this big Kirtan Mahotsav, and not long after they had started singing Krishna's name, out from the jungle walked Uddhav. He was singing Krishna Leelas, and he praised everybody for coming there and singing Krishna's name. And he came and embraced Vajranath. And he said, I'm going to tell the Bhagwatam. I'm going to tell the Bhagwatam for 1 month, and all of these people here will get to see Krishna's divine Leelas and enter into his divine abode simply by hearing the Bhagwatam. Because when Krishna was leaving this earth planet, I asked him, Krishna, how can you leave? What will your devotees do? And he replied, don't worry, Uddhav, they will have the Bhagwatam. I'm putting myself in the Bhagwatam. And Shri Krishna himself put his whole power, his entire divine blissfulness into the Bhagwatam. Thus the Bhagwatam is considered to be another form of Shri Krishna. It practically contains the bliss of Krishna's divine beauty, his form, his leelas, his gunas. So Uddhav said, for the souls who are here now, the only recourse is the Bhagwatam. Wherever Bhagwatam is recited or listened to, Shri Krishna and the gopis come to that place and manifest their leelas. So I'm going to tell the Bhagwatam for a whole month. However, he told King Parikshit, I want you to go out and conquer the 4 corners of the earth, and in the process, I want you to subdue Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the age we currently live in. There's 4 ages, Satyug, Tretayug, Dwaparayug, and Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is considered, from a material point of view, to be the worst. Because in Kali Yuga, basically the behavior of people and the society in general degenerates from good to bad. Compared to other yugas where there's more good and less bad, in Kali Yuga there's more bad and the good is less. So I want you to go out and subdue Kali Yuga so that Kali Yuga does not create any disturbance in this Bhagavad Katha that I'm going to do. So Parikshit thought that, how am I going to hear Bhagavatam then? I also want to hear Bhagavatam. So Uddhav said, don't worry, you'll get to hear Bhagwatam at a later date from Shukdev Ji himself. But for now, you have this duty to do. So Parikshit went out. While he was out, Vajranath put his son on the throne, and he came and listened to the Bhagavad. Of course, all the other devotees of the entire area, they all came, so there was a huge crowd sitting there to listen to the entire month-long recitation of the Bhagavatam, telling all of Krishna's Leelas by Uddhavji. And during that time, as Uddhava had said, everyone saw Krishna and gopis and all of the Leelas, and at the end, the queens actually merged into Shri Krishna, and all of the other listeners, they got to join into those Vastavi Leelas of Krishna. They also became eternal associates of Shri Krishna. But Parikshit was out. He missed the whole thing because he was out conquering the four corners of the earth, and while he was doing so, he found Kali-yuga. Kali-yuga also has a personal form. And he found him, he was there was a cow and a bull, and he was beating up on them. He was kicking the cow and kicking the bull. So Parikshit found him doing this, and he grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, and he was ready to kill him. But Kali-yuga begged. Kali-yuga fell at his feet and begged for mercy and said, please, I'll do whatever you say, but please give me somewhere to reside. So what did Parikshit do? Did he allow Kali-yuga to live? And if so, where did he allow Kali-yuga to reside? You can come back tomorrow and hear the rest of this story, as well as how did Parikshit end up hearing the Bhagavatam from Shukdev Ji.